Tony Gosling is standing by. The man behind not the BCFM Politics Show, which is in Bristol every Friday at 5 p.m. It's a terrific radio show. During my forced sabbatical, Tony was kind enough to invite me on for a bit of a chat. He's a former BBC journalist, as you know, a brilliant radio broadcaster, and very last minute, as I only managed to plug it all in today mid-afternoon, I reached out to Tony and said, look, you must have some thoughts about the events in Australia, and he very kindly said, yes, I do have thoughts and I'm happy to share them with your listeners. Tony, welcome back to the programme. How are you, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Richie. Very well, yeah. I mean, my journey's been a weird one, really, from spending a couple of years being friends with Nick Land, the father of accelerationism, which is this problem reaction solution, the actual term for it, the idea of creating crises, political, everywhere, and then coming up with a solution to make things worse. This idea of creating chaos all over the country, all over the West, particularly in the States, they're doing it, deindustrializing. All this stuff was part and parcel of the philosophy of this Nietzschean philosopher, Nick Land, who I was at school with. And then a bit later in life, after the BBC, hooked up with George Monbiot, another rather peculiar chap who said he was an environmentalist, but then he changed and became pro-nuclear energy, pro-nuclear power. Everyone who knew him was surprised. And now he says the biggest threat to the world is farming. And he thinks that it's a good idea to get the family farmers off the land and replace them with solar farms. So I've had a bit of a bizarre journey. And of course, as you know, doing journalism through all of this, you're privy to a lot of stuff, off the record chats, etc., as well as the stories we cover day to day, week to week, that very few people have access to. So I see journalism as a great privilege. And it's lovely to be able to be given a chance. Of course, I'm completely cancelled here in the Western world. The only place other than RT, which I was doing stuff for many years on there, is Iranian Press TV. They have me on quite regularly, but that, of course, itself is banned. I feel totally and utterly banned in Britain. So anyway, I really appreciate the way
thank you very much.
Give me a buzz on the story and get
You're
me
very
to chat
kind.
about.
And I'm going to take this opportunity, and I never ever do this. It might very well be the case, and I know it's the case, that you don't get offered a gig here in the UK. But when this programme is on air, as it is, it has a pretty hefty listenership in this country, and it regularly, in the podcast charts in this country, beats some of the most famous presenters in the UK. So, there's an appetite for this type of conversation, Tony, because it's nuanced, it's contextualised, it's long form. But I want to push back on something you kicked off with there. Why can't it be the case that two men sickened by the genocide in Gaza. Now, I'm not justifying this, by the way. There is no justification for killing anybody, and Jews around the world are not responsible for the Israeli genocide. But why can't it be the case that you get a couple of guys sick to their stomachs, Muslims maybe, seeing what's gone on in Gaza, and they decided, well, do you know what, we're going to get a little bit of our own back. Why can't it be a simple solution this time? To me, it makes sense.
Well, it doesn't make sense to kill people who are innocent. And these people, obviously, in Australia are innocent. They're not involved in that genocide. Some of them may well be giving help to the Israeli cause, but that's no reason to kill them. The people who, if you wanted to have vengeance on, are those who are actually involved in the war crimes. Now, I'm talking here about specific individuals in the British government, in the US government.
Yeah, but let me jump in briefly. Hang on. Let me jump in briefly. But if I'm right, we're not talking about rational people. We're talking about people enraged by the avalanche of social media videos of children being murdered. That person might not be rational and determined for himself, well, obviously these Jews don't have anything to do with it. That person might think, well, they're Jews, so they're fair game. It's not impossible, Tony.
Well, actually, in a weird way, it's the Jewish law, isn't it? An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. What's been going on in Gaza is a massive provocation. So Saturday night in Bondi Beach, Sunday morning our time, 15 were shot dead, 29 are now in hospital. And the motivation, I mean, this is let's just think about the motivation. The latest reports I've seen suggest there may be as many as 165,000 innocent people killed in Gaza.
Yeah.
In the genocide. Now, of course, this is enraging people. It's annoying to see the failure of international law and the United Nations to deal with this in any way. I mean, it would seem to me very basic and obvious for the world to get itself organised to deal with it, in terms of either smashing bulldozers through the wall around Gaza, doing a systematic bunch of airdrops, making sure that it's a no-fly zone for the Israelis over Gaza. These sorts of things by the surrounding countries, whether it's Syria, Jordan, etc., and the wider world, it would seem an obvious thing to do to protect these innocent people, but that's not happened. And so you can see why people might be motivated. Look, the guy, apparently, the younger guy was investigated in 2019 as a terrorist by the Australian authorities. And he was found in a terrorist assessment not to be a terrorist. Yet, he and his family are allowed access to, what is it? I think it's 6 guns. So even though he's been undergone a terrorist assessment, it's still okay to have 6 guns. I mean, that obviously is insane. Somebody who's a suspected terrorist shouldn't have access to that many weapons, or even any weapons, actually. And that seems to me to be a complete, this is the sort of thing, by the way, that happened. Exactly the same sort of thing happened in New Zealand with the mosque killing, because Brenton Tarrant, who carried that out, he was known as a maniac, a lunatic. He was reported in Dunedin, where he was in New Zealand, to the authorities several times by people at his gun club who said, look, this guy shouldn't have a weapon. And yet he was allowed to carry on having a weapon. Now, it seems to me that what may happen here is when the authorities identify somebody that might become a terrorist, they are actually then encouraging them to be a terrorist, because this fulfills geopolitical aims. This sends out a great shockwave around the world's media saying, oh, those terrible, evil Muslims. Yes, it is evil. 15 people have been killed, 29 people put in hospital. But let's compare this to the outrage over the 165,000 dead Palestinians.
But there is a lot of outrage, though. In the UK, Ireland, Western Europe, there's a lot of outrage. I mean, here's the thing. You had the chief rabbi for the UK, Ephraim Mervis, going on national media this morning, calling for his response to it. I might be being a bit unkind to him, but the gist of his response, he made more of needing to deal with hate speech and to deal with slogans or sloganeering like Global Intifada and sloganeering around from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. We need to have a massive crackdown on these kinds of phrases and hate speech, he said. So that's been... So for the problem reaction solution brigade, and I'm not being in any way derogatory here, because I think of course it's possible that this was a false flag. Of course it's possible. They have history. They have previous, as we well know. And Australia did condemn utterly the Israeli conduct in the Gaza Strip. And of course the Australians were, at least vocally anyway, all for recognising Palestinian statehood. So these are all interesting things, right?
Can I interrupt you? Because, I mean, I see a lot of similarities here with the various attacks in 2017 in London. That is and Manchester. That is to say, the London Bridge, the Westminster Bridge, and the Manchester Arena. Because all of those suspects and the people that actually carried out those attacks were very well known to the security services. They've been reported to them. I think what happens here is once someone is a potential terrorist, they then get brought in and they get actually encouraged to be a terrorist. Now, whether this is through...
how would that work, Tony? Tony, how would that work? Give it
through human intelligence. So that is to say, agents are put in order to really sort of seed their anger, say that they would be a hero if they went and killed people. That someone is put in deliberately into their social circle to encourage them. And also, of course, lots of opportunity for online grooming. Now, I looked in very closely into the Shamima Begum case. She was encouraged by intelligence officers online to go to become an ISIS bride. That's why she went to Turkey. That's why she went to Syria, is because the Canadian intelligence services have been encouraging her. Now, that is an absolute fact, and that's the reason they don't want Shamima Begum to come back to Britain, is because that's what she would explain to everyone. She would tell everyone how she was sent over there. The articles are all out there. People want to look. It was all in the Turkish press. So this, I think, is what happens, is they've got to have a fight and a battle between Zionism and Islam, and that's how they do it. The intelligence services will encourage, as of course we saw with the 9/11 attacks, all of these Saudi hijackers, alleged hijackers, these people were all encouraged to do what they did by the Mossad and by the Central Intelligence Agency. It didn't just happen as an accident. And the real hero of Saturday night at Bondi is this guy, Ahmed Al-Ahmed. I'm sure you saw. This should be the story.
Yeah, the man who intervened. Yeah, he attacked one of the. Well, he subdued.
He saved loads of Jews, didn't he, from being killed? Yeah. Now, I don't think it's clear about how many. They haven't made it clear how many of the victims were actually Jewish, were part of this celebration. They've kind of implied that they all were, but they haven't made that clear. Now, that seems to me a bit, deliberate. It's trying to say, well, everybody, we can just assume they were all Jewish, all of the victims. Now, they may be, but they've left that very vague, haven't they?
They have left it very vague, yeah.
Sneaky journalism.
It is, and again, I mentioned in the monologue, it's just one of those things. The entirety of the mainstream media is co-opted, is in league with these agendas. So nobody's going to pick apart any of this. Like, they're not telling their listeners. Much of what you've been able to uncover yourself this afternoon, there's no room for long form discussion about this. It's black and white. The guys are crazy. They hate Israel, and they kill these Jews. Therefore, we need hate speech laws. Yeah,
we get a lot of ding dong between Albanese's been accused by Netanyahu, saying it's all your fault. You recognise Palestine. Well, of course, this is. I'd like to use a swear word. I won't. It's nonsense. The idea that by Australia recognising Palestine, that the pro-Palestinians in Israel are going to get more angry because of that? No, of course they're not. They're going to be less angry because of that. So Netanyahu, of course, is just lying, as he always does. And I think one of the things I'd like to do, just to get into this, which is a whole bigger picture side of it, is what is Netanyahu up to with this crusader state that they've created over the First World War, when the British got hold of Palestine, and the Second World War, when the United Nations created the State of Israel. They've now got this crusader state like it was back in medieval times. But what is he really up to? I think he's there to create as much chaos as possible. He's got massive access to the world's media. Everything he says is reported, which I'm afraid people like me don't have that.
No.
But he does. And he's heard all over the world, and it doesn't even matter, it seems to me, if what he says makes no sense. There are no journalists who will say, well, actually, what Netanyahu's just said is nonsense. And only Albanese is really basically the boss over in Australia has really called him out and said, well, actually, no, this has actually made relations here better. But anyway, Netanyahu is using this to just feed this whole agenda around the world, which is, I don't know if you've been using these terms, Pax Judaica, Pax Zionica, the idea that you've got a massive network of pro-Zionists, whether it's through Freemasonry, through its British Israelism, whether it's through the Labour Friends of Israel, Conservative Friends of Israel, the Israel Lobby in all its forms. All over, mostly the United Kingdom and the United States and Israel, which is doing everything it can, it seems to me, to dumb down the population, and anybody that really interrogates what's going on in the world gets destroyed by these people. They have their view. It makes no sense. this whole idea of the Israelis are the victims. They're not the victims. They are an extremely aggressive, fascistic state. They've even admitted to being fascists, and yet we're supposed to believe that they're the victims. And that's what this sort of a terrorist attack does again. If the journalists don't interrogate what people like Netanyahu are saying and how Netanyahu's interpreting it.
You're listening to Tony Gosling. You'll be able to catch him on Friday. He's not going anywhere just yet, but you'll catch him on Friday out of Bristol, 5 p.m. The BCFM Politics Show, thisweek.org.uk, bilderberg.org. Tony is an author as well. Check out his book, The Traitors of Arnhem, which is a fantastic read, very relevant to the events we are discussing. I wanted to ask you, I want to throw a curveball at you. I think I've done this one before, though. I believe we're living in the attitude era of politics. I believe that politics has shifted towards a kind of a late 1990s World Wrestling Federation type of deal. I believe this came about because of the waning interest in politics and politicians in the decade before Trump came along. And for me, Trump is the first attitude era president, where it's just one big massive circus designed to distract people from much of what you discuss on your program every Friday. The reality, the agenda's coming. And I'm asking you this because there's a great example of this attitude era today. The very talented actor and director Rob Reiner seemingly has been murdered by his own son. That's the latest intelligence police have in Hollywood. A gruesome, grotesque, horrible murder, it would appear. And into this comes Donald Trump on his own Truth social media platform, blaming Reiner's derangement syndrome, Trump derangement syndrome, on his untimely demise, saying that he died and his wife did, quote, due to the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome. Now, there are those who will look at that and think, well, this is just mad. Trump is mad. But I think it's something else, Tony. The attitude era of politics. What do you make of it? It's unprecedented.
Well, I mean, I didn't know that this guy was so anti-Trump. The fact that he's been murdered, possibly by someone in his own family. Yeah. I mean, this is the sort of thing that they do like to stage in the States. I mean, when I first heard the story, I was thinking immediately about, and I do often think about the Sharon Tate murders in the late 60s, I think it was, where you've got people who are key people in Hollywood suddenly dying. And the idea is this sends out, again, a shockwave across society, changing attitudes, making people think that this is, something specific is going on rather than this is just a random attack on a celebrity. And in fact, I think the guy's name is John Potash. It's well worth people looking into him. There's several interviews with him around. Did a whole load of investigations into the murders of pop stars and rock stars in the United States, and of course some, I think, in the UK, but it's mainly American rock stars. People like Jim Morrison, the other ones, Jimi Hendrix. There were a whole load of murders of these well-known celebrity musicians, which were all linked to intelligence services. So as these people became famous, generally in the 1960s, and it came to the 1970s, it was almost as if the dream was being deliberately crushed and smashed. As these people became influential, most of them were anti-war and powerful in society. They were deliberately killed off. And it was made to look, some of them probably did. I mean, Joplin, I think possibly it was an overdose with her, but many of the other ones. So this killing your heroes, you set up some icons, the annoying idiots, people like Mick Jagger, sorry for those Rolling Stones fans, people like him will always survive because he's actually really very pro-establishment. He's, part of a small clique of elite. Whereas those that think that they can say what they want and do what they want, the independent-minded ones, those are the ones they seem to go for. So maybe this guy was independent-minded. I've no idea, really, and I don't know enough about the killing to know. But all I can say is that the people who are very creative and have creative power and influence in the States often find themselves coming a cropper, and it isn't always what you think it is on the surface. Obviously, Lennon is another really important example. That was definitely a intelligence service hit. He was just about to go on a massive world peace tour with a comeback album, and so they decided, no, we're just going to bump him off. And of course, that is much more likely to have happened in the United States. If John had stayed in the UK, I think he'd probably even still be alive today.
By the way, thanks, Tony. If anybody wants to read about John Lennon, David Whelan has written brilliantly on John. Yes, absolutely fantastic. Brilliant guy. Yeah. David Whelan, if he's listening. Now, I'd like you to answer a couple of quick-fire questions from our listeners, because they're very interested in your thoughts here. Claire has come in. Tony, only the younger of the two attackers might know the truth. He's in hospital. So Tony says, Claire, in your opinion, regardless of this guy's medical situation, is his life at risk? The remaining living witness, the second attacker, is he in serious trouble, do you think, in hospital?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course his life's at risk. Anybody that knows can talk and tell a tale and a story about somebody who's been influencing maybe his father. If this is in the background to the case, their life is most definitely in danger. You know, that this is, I think, for example, the attacker we had in Manchester, the idea that police will just kill him, even though he's only armed with knives, it seemed at the time. There's no need to kill the guy. You want to have a trial. Surely you want to find out who's put him up to it. But no, the police in Manchester didn't only kill the guy with the knives at the Manchester synagogue. They also killed a worshipper behind the door, shooting randomly at, almost as if they didn't care where the bullets went. And this whole attitude, I think,
Can I just say it's important here?
Yeah.
A very good friend of mine is currently employed, I should say, as a firearms officer with Greater Manchester Police, and he's a good kid, right? A little bit younger than me, and he reckons the officers on the scene did about as well as they could possibly do at the Manchester synagogue, because this guy was armed. They didn't know if this guy had a device on him. They didn't know anything other than he'd been trying to kill people. And the best thing in that instance is to neutralise the guy, to put him down quick. That's what my friend says. And he is
I think that's
an armed guard.
Excuse. I'm sure he's a very good friend of yours, but I'm afraid I totally and utterly disagree with him. And a professional opinion is that you want to have a proper fair trial where all the information comes out about who this guy was and who put him up to it, don't you? Rather than to think, oh well, he might have a suicide vest.
Yeah, but he was trying to kill people. But there were people hiding in the building, and he was trying to get access to the building. He was
prone on the floor, Richie. He was prone on the floor. There was nobody around him. They should have taken whatever measures to bring him in alive. This idea of, do you remember back in the 1980s, Thames Television program Death on the Rock, where there was a massive long discussion all over the nation. This is in the 1980s, about this concept of shoot to kill in Northern Ireland. No, you never shoot to kill. What you do is you shoot if absolutely necessary, in order to disable, whatever, to stop the person. But this excuse of every time of, there might be a suicide. They did this
hang
with
on, my memory.
John Charles de Menezes as well.
I know, and that was terrible. But
this is a pathetic excuse.
No, hang on a second.
If you've got firearms, Tony, you use them to disarm the person, and then you bring them in.
Let me back in. The guy was prone on the ground outside the synagogue because they shot him. And the shooting of him while he was upright, waving a knife around, was justifiable. Now you might say, well, aim for a leg or aim for an arm. I put that very point, or those very points, to my friend who's employed in GMP, and he said, you try that in a situation where it's as frantic as that. The guy had to be shot. They didn't want to kill him, but that's what he says. Well, that's what he says. You're a journalist, not a marksman, by the way.
Well, you won't fall out with you, but no,
you won't fall out with me.
You disabled the guy. The guy was killed when he was prone on the floor. He was just rolling over on his back, and he was killed as he was rolling over on his back. He'd already been shot once. He was shot again and killed. Now, this to me is covering up evidence, and it may even be that people within Greater Manchester Police were involved with undercover operations around the guy that went in there with the knives. So look, let's just be straight about this. If you were a ruthless and an evil police force, you can, if you wish to, run all sorts of agent provocateurs, all sorts of agents, and because you kill somebody, rather than bring them in and get evidence off them and put them on trial, this is a very convenient way of burying evidence. Dead man tell no tales. And that is actually a mafia tactic. It's not a civilized police tactic.
Yeah, I'm in the middle here again. My friend, my friend would disagree, and he would say a guy has already.
Depends on it,
but don't forget, there was a guy lying on the street with blood pouring out of his neck, while this guy is running around with a knife. My friend would say, and again I'm in the middle here. My friend would say, you have to shoot that guy. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, you did.
And
you did shoot him, and he was lying prone on the ground. And then when he tried to roll over to see what the hell was going on, yes, he's an evil bloke, they shot him again and killed him. They didn't need to do that. And not only did they shoot him again and killed him, they also shot a guy who was behind him in the synagogue behind the door and killed him too. So they're just, I think, totally incompetent, your mates.
And I'm going to give you the last word on that. Badger's been in touch. Richie, what does Tony reckon to the Australians enacting a law or bringing a law in to deny access to social media sites to children under 16? It's a huge coincidence, he says, is it? Alongside this attack yesterday. But it seems the globalists, according to Badger, are rolling out their control system. It might have caused annoyance and motivated the attack. Do you think there's any relationship between the Australian government's determination to prevent children from going on social media with the attack yesterday? What do you think?
Well, I'd like to buy your mate Badger a pint, because that was my first thought. As soon as I heard, because it's a very big step for the Australian government to do this, to detach under 16s from these surveillance machines that we call phones. And yes, of course, it's a very good thing that the Australian government have done, because there's been a total failure to enforce the law around the world, particularly in the UK, when it comes to things like hardcore pornography, in fact, any kinds of pornography online. They just haven't bothered. They could do it, but they don't bother. And as there's this book out, which I reviewed last week on my show, called Pornocracy, by Joe Bartosh, which explains just how poisonous and pernicious pornography is for young people, because it sets their minds on completely the wrong sort of sexual relationships, sometimes for the rest of their lives. Now, I think it's a great thing that the Australian government has done, and it was my first thought as well, Badger. What's going to happen to the Australians now they've done this? They're going to be in trouble, and suddenly there's a terror attack against them of some sort. So that isn't impossible. But I also think that the whole idea of recognising Palestine, that's been put forward as another possible reason. And what always really enrages me and inflames makes my blood boil, is this always talking about it as anti-Semitism. No, it's anti-Israel. It's anti-Zionism. It's not anti-Semitism. Now, it might be that these people are misguided and they've thought that, these people are all very pro-Zionist or something. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Not all Jews around the world, of course, do support the Israeli state and Zionism, although most do. It is actually, it's anti the genocide. That's why these people have picked up guns, most likely, or been encouraged to do so, is because there's a genocide been going on. Trump seems to have managed to sort of rein it back a little bit with quite a lot of bamboozling and possibly threatening Netanyahu he's going to cut off the $3 billion a year that they give to the Israelis. But it's a genocide nevertheless. But it's not anti-Semitism. It's not the sort of anti-Semitism we saw Hitler doing, because most of the Jews that Hitler killed, the millions in the Second World War in the concentration camps, were actually not Zionists. They were the ones who'd refused to go to Palestine, to be shipped out to Palestine in the 1930s. So this is a twisting of history and the truth. to constantly use this term anti-Semitism. It's not. It's, in my view, it's just anti-Zionism and anti-Israeli state and anti-genocide.
Tony Gosling is our guest. Two different listeners have asked the same question. Geraldine, good evening, Geraldine, and Kieran. You don't tell me where you are, but basic question. Do you think, because the media coverage of something like yesterday is total, like everything is dropped and we get 24, 48, 72 hours of non-stop coverage, does it have an impact on the shopping populations of cities in the UK, Ireland, Germany, Italy? Are people, do you think, changed by seeing these big events and maybe a little bit less inclined or even hesitant to go into city centres because they somehow fear this might happen to them? Is that a payoff? Asks Geraldine and Kieran.
You know, that's part of it, I suppose. But the main thing is to bamboozle people. They're not talking about the 165,000 dead in the genocide. Maybe they should be as a potential motive for this. And of course the press should be, but they're not talking about that. And also they don't want people to understand the nuances of Zionism and Israel and Judaism, for example. So there is something called the Amidah prayer, which the Jews pray in the synagogues and have been doing since something like 1000 BC. Which is this loving God, we wish for you to take us back to Jerusalem, which is lovely. But the thing is, Zionism, which started with Theodor Herzl in the 19th century, is, well, we've got fed up waiting for God. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick up guns and we're going to kill in order to get Jerusalem back. Now, there's an enormous difference between that sort of religious Zionism and the political Zionism, massive difference. And you know, I don't know if your listeners have heard this. The BBC are now doing this compulsory training course. Over the last couple of weeks, it's first started. The idea is they want to get everybody by January has got to do the course. And part of that course, they are instructing the journalists, producers, researchers, that none of them are allowed to use the word Zionism. They all have to use the word Israel, Israeli state, or Judaism.
You've seen this,
mostly
Tony.
The Israeli state. They are not allowed to use the word Zionism. Now, it's such an important concept that we're not allowed to know what it is. So the press is being used to ban. The BBC has a big crest on the outside of it, on Broadcasting House, which says, "Nation shall speak peace unto nation." Well, I think we should get up there with a chisel and a sledgehammer and chisel that off and put "nation will be bamboozled to go to war with nation." That seems to me to be what the BBC is now about.
You've seen this directive, you have. You've seen it yourself. This directive about not using the term Zionism.
Yes. It's a training program the BBC are running at the moment, and I just had a look through it. And one of the things that everyone has to do who works there is be told don't use the word Zionism. You can check it out if you want. I'm not sure quite.
No,
sure
I wasn't.
I picked it out, but I read through the thing. I thought, what the BBC training? I mean, when I did BBC training, I'm talking here about 1993. I went through, did several training courses, and I was quite annoyed to be told that we should fake interviews. And because I went out actually around London interviewing people in the street, vox popping them basically, sticking a microphone under, asking them questions. I brought it all back, and then the instructor said, "Well, you could have just faked that with somebody here."
We've had a really interesting message from Jean, and she's the mother of a former armed police officer. And she says, "I'm listening to the programme. I'm a bit upset about it as Tony..."
What?
Listen, I'm going to read it out now, and then you can comment on it, right?
Okay. Yeah.
It's quite upsetting to hear Tony. My blood's boiling as well. Does he want the police to just stand there and watch the perpetrator running around doing whatever he wants?
He wasn't. He was on the floor.
Let me finish. The police are trained very well to cope with these situations, and in Jean's opinion, they got it spot on at the synagogue near Heaton Park. as the mum of a former armed officer. She says she's upset that you've got to give the police credit where credit is due. This guy was hell-bent on killing Jewish people worshipping at a synagogue, and the police did the best they could, bearing in mind there was a guy lying on the floor only 15 metres away, losing his life as blood was gushing out of his throat. Why are we feeling sorry for this guy, says Jean. I think she has a point, Tony.
Well, no, I don't. Of course I don't. I mean, it's nothing to do with whether someone is dying nearby. The point is, you want to know what has caused this, and you want this guy to go to jail, and you want him to tell you exactly what brought him to that situation, whether he was groomed to do it, etc., whereabouts he got the knives from. You want to know everything about it.
In an ideal world, yeah.
You can't do that. You can't do that if you've blown his brains out.
But that's in an ideal world, though.
They'd much rather have a woolly little inquest which doesn't know anything about how he got where he was. It may be he was part of the mental health system. It may be he was on antipsychotic, antidepressant drugs or something, which can make people go crazy, and many people have recently. And get extremely violent and aggressive, and then he's just let out by the mental health system. But we cannot stop things like that happening by blowing his brains out.
No, but I don't want... hang on. When a guy is running around trying to kill people, I'm not necessarily sure that I want our armed policemen and women wondering about... I wonder what motivated him, and I wonder, is he a bit of a madman? Is he on antipsychotic medication? And I wonder if we could, and this and that and the other thing. Their job is to stop that immediately. That's their job. And in the case of a guy who they have good reason to believe is an Islamist terrorist, as far as they're concerned, the police on the scene, they don't know, as I said. But hang on, but they don't know. But they don't know that, and they don't know that the man isn't wearing or carrying an explosive device. And they're trained to think like that. We've shot the guy, he's down, we're telling him to stop. The guy's not stopping, he's still moving. We've got to stop this. Finish it now. Let's hope the guy lives, but finish it now.
Then he won't have a trial. It might be that the police are killing him because there's less paperwork to do.
Oh, yeah, but... you see, you're guilty, and I know you're not, because you're a completely independent.
I want a trial,
journalist.
Richie. I want a trial.
Yeah, but that
and
sounds.
Also, they're there to apprehend the guy. They're not there to blow his brains out, are they?
But this idea that they want to bury evidence, I'd expect that from the likes of Talk TV or GB News. These are young men and women. They're trained to kill.
Have you actually seen the footage where he is prone on the ground? He can hardly move. He's been shot. And he just rolls onto his side, and then they kill him.
I've seen the footage, yeah.
Right. So that's no excuse for that at all. The guy's already prone. I think we should just sort of...
agree to disagree.
If you think we're living in a police state, and I think we're heading towards a police state, then we need to be pulling the police up on this. When you had the army over in Gibraltar killing the IRA people rather than arresting them, that, it seems to me, was the thin end of the wedge. And we're now getting towards the thick end of the wedge, where the police will blow someone's brains out first and ask questions later. They're not interested in trials.
Yeah, but that's a very simplistic explanation for what happened near Heaton Park, that they just blew his brains out and then asked questions later. I have to say it again. I'm going to give you my final word, and then you'll have your final word on that, and then I have one more question for you about something completely different. My final word on that is, regardless of what happened and why it happened and the motivation behind it, and if there was something sinister, my final word on this is, the officers arriving on the scene are confronted by a guy who has stabbed somebody to death and who is hell-bent on entering a building where people are cowering, where if he gets in there, he's going to stab even more people to death. He's not complying with their orders, and he's shot. And they might think, this isn't over yet. This guy might have an improvised device. So after telling him to stop moving, they shoot him again. That's how I see it. Final word on that to you, and then I want to briefly talk about something else. Thank you, Jean, for your message, by the way.
He wasn't going anywhere. He was stood there. He couldn't get anywhere. He wasn't going to go near the police. And then they shot him. He's on the ground. He's not going anywhere. Arrest him. At least wait until you know that he's safe. But there's no need to kill people bring them in, put them on trial. The police shouldn't be doing that at all. No way. And that's what a police state does. Is it shoots first, it asks questions later. And of course, these officers know that there's pretty much everybody that dies, whether it's at the hands of the police, like Mark Duggan, or in custody, that the police always get off, because there isn't a proper criminal justice system in this country.
You can't blanket all the police, though, Tony. Hang on a second. My very good friend who is a serving. Yeah, no, you will, but but I have to challenge that. Or I'm not doing my job. My very good friend who is a serving firearms officer with Manchester Police, he doesn't want to shoot anybody. The last thing in the world he ever wants to do is to pull his gun on anybody. And I would imagine most people who end up as firearms officers, who do that sort of training, they probably live with the fear they'll have to do it. They don't want to do it, I would imagine, the majority of them.
Let me organise some... maybe Greater Manchester Police should come to a Tony Gosling firearms training course, where you come away with a live suspect apprehended to put on trial, rather than a course.
I wanted to ask you about something else. Tony, by the way, thisweek.org.uk, bilderberg.org. He'll be on here on Friday. It's an unmissable radio show every Friday out of Bristol. You'll be challenged while listening to it, which is great. You'll hear things you don't like, which is great. Won't do you any harm at all. Isn't it fascinating, Tony, that the representatives of junior doctors in this country are coming out. Now, this is all about this doctors' strike, which is going to go ahead this week. Junior doctors have been fighting with the government for a number of years about an increase in pay, backdated. They say, look, our pay hasn't risen in line with inflation for a very long time. We're overworked, we're underpaid. They might very well be, I don't know. And so they've come out. I really do think this is worth noting and speaking about. Out they come and they say, and I love this, they say that the government is fear-mongering and exploiting this situation, telling the British public that they are in danger because of this flu outbreak we have at the moment, and that in fact this is not the case at all. Now, this is beyond just breaking ranks. This is really interesting. It's basically calling the government liars and saying, no, there isn't any massive crisis. We're not snowed under. We can manage it. What do you reckon, Tony, to this row?
Number one, this is a double whammy, this flu obsession, isn't it, in the press? First of all, the idea is it's a dog whistle. Go and get your flu jab, flu jab. The flu jab, I would say, don't get your flu jab, because it's not necessarily going to help you at all just to avoid getting the flu, and it might even make you more ill. But the other thing is, of course, to try and guilt trip the doctors. Now, the guy they're dealing with, Wes Streeting, Health Secretary, is a Bilderberger. And being a Bilderberger, I mean, it's him and Lammy, plus one or two others. Tugendhat is the Tories of Bilderberger. There's a few around at the moment, on both sides, of course, in the Uni Party, who are Bilderbergers. But he's extremely well advised, I would say, by some of the best PR people and corporate lawyers on planet Earth via the Bilderberg. So they will be giving him very good advice. The idea is Wes Streeting is going to be the winner, who is possibly going to be next Prime Minister, etc. So that's what they do. And he has played an absolute blinder today. By saying, let's just extend their mandate for strike action until January to see everybody through Christmas, and not strike just before Christmas. Now, this is a brilliant move by Streeting. However, the British Medical Association, the Doctors' Union, are just not up to the job. They should realise, look, this is going to lose us public sympathy if we say no to this. And Streeting has won. He's won this round of poker over Christmas. People will be getting more and more annoyed with the doctors for not working. They should have just listened to what he's saying and said, "Oh crikey, yeah, we're going to lose loads of public support if we go against this, and we don't wait till January to strike, and we do it right now." So I see this as a sort of massive PR battle, really, which this latest round of which the doctors have lost.
Yeah, but the fact they're claiming that they're lying and weaponising the term they used was weaponising public anxiety and effectively saying that this flu crisis isn't what the government is making it out to be. That's the part of it that really interests me.
I know. Look, I know that is fascinating. Yeah. I'm not trying to sort of divert from that. It's just that today's announcement by Streeting has just completely floored the doctors. Now, look, yes, you're right. Flu is used to scare people. And of course, go and get your vaccine. A lot of the medical information we're getting these days is actually geared around dog whistle politics to get people to get vaccinated. Of course, there's guilt tripping going on. All these poor people filling up the hospitals, just like during COVID. It is rubbish. It is nonsense. I had a look at the stats to do with flu. It is just marginally more at this point of December than it was the last couple of years. But it's certainly, it's certainly been, their PR people at the Department of Health have sat down and thought, and the pharmaceutical industry who instruct them have said, this is a good thing to talk about. So, but of course, the Hugh Pims and the health correspondents around the London press never pick up on this stuff. They just report it, baldly, and they never realise that they've been bamboozled and the public are being bamboozled. There's no filtration anymore by journalists of the PR that comes out of Big Pharma or West Streeting.
Thanks for that, by the way, jumping in last minute today. I really appreciate it. I've got about 500 messages to read on the shooting at the synagogue. Really interesting takes on that. Tony will be back on this programme, I reckon, very early in January. No doubt about that. Catch him on Friday, 5 p.m, thisweek.org.uk, bilderberg.org, the BCFM Politics Show, live out of Bristol. Every year we do this. It's been so many years you've been coming on. By the way, I'll be in Bruton again on Wednesday with my dog, having more stem cell therapy. I'm not sure I'll bump into you there, but I'll be in your neck of the woods in your neighbourhood. Merry Christmas to you and yours, pal, and thank you for your appearances on this programme throughout 2025. They're always valuable and greatly appreciated by me and our listeners. Merry Christmas and thank you, Tony.
Merry Christmas. I just want to say one quickie little thing.
Go ahead.
Which is about China and about President Xi. We had, I thought, a fascinating piece. If your listeners are interested in China, China seems to be behaving themselves, don't they? And I always remember years ago sitting on a train coming from Grove Park Station up to Charing Cross, I think it was, or maybe to Victoria. From somewhere else, and sitting next to a couple of guys who, after chatting with for a little while, they were very reticent about who they were. They were very posh, seemed to be like Foreign Office types of some sort, diplomats or something. But anyway, chatting to them about China, they were like, "Oh God, what are we going to do about China? We don't know. What the hell are we going to do?" But anyway, this is a piece that I put out, which is a history of President Xi, where he's come from, who he is, how he conned his way into power by pretending to be a man of the people, and then he's all these various people over the years who he has put in place. He's then sacked in a rather Hitlerian fashion. The idea, of course, with the SA and Ernst Röhm was these people were there to help him get to power. Then once they'd done that job, they were dispensed with. But there's this thing called Document Number 9, which is fascinating piece of evidence that China is there to destroy all of the sorts of, to look like they're a nice little country, but it's completely authoritarian, and destroy all these sort of democratic liberal values. So we're talking here about free speech. We're talking here about the people having a say in the way they're governed. We're talking here about having any kind of freedom of the press. All these things are going to be destroyed. That's what this document number 9 says. So they're, I think, sitting and waiting, making money, waiting for the rest of the world to fight it out. And then once they've done that, they are literally the model for the future. The Chinese, President Xi, totalitarian system is the model for the future. So don't be fooled into thinking that China is somehow benevolent, because they're not as aggressive as the United States. And I think ultimately there will be a war between China and the US. And I think it's almost impossible to stop, however much we talk about it and warn people that ultimately will happen. But, President Xi, fascinating character, and basically the guy's a robot.
I hope you're wrong. Thanks again. Great to have you back. I couldn't
Richie.
more hope you're wrong. Thanks, Tony. Tony Gosling,
Right.
live on
Right.
the Richie Allen Show for Monday, the 15th of December 2025. Catch Tony this coming Friday. It's worth repeating. 5 p.m. live, thisweek.org.uk or bilderberg.org. It's terrific. He chops it up then and he puts it on YouTube later on. Good to have him on the programme today. The time is 29 minutes now to the top of the hour. It really is, yeah.
Download the Richie Allen Show app now at Google Play or Apple's App Store. For more details, visit richieallen.co.uk.